Hello there. May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day, so I thought I'd do something a little bit different on my channel to the normal stuff. Now, for years you've seen me sitting here talking about video games, and you've probably seen a few little hints that I'm a big Star Wars fan. Hints like this and this. But today I'm going to turn the camera around and take a look at the rest of my room, and hopefully if you're a Star Wars fan like I am, you'll find it quite enjoyable. Here we go then. This is the view I get when I'm recording all those intros for my videos. As you can see, we start with a nice big pop art style picture of R2-D2. There's also a cardboard cutout R2-D2 there, but let's get into the bigger stuff. Firstly, let's start with this, because I've always been amused by this. Maybe you will be, or maybe you won't be. This is my light switch. So I've got the dark side and the light side. I'm gonna have to keep the lights on for this video because it's pretty dull outside because it's raining at the moment. So let's pan around to begin with and just give you a view of my Star Wars collection. We've got some vintage original figures at the top there. We've got some potato heads with various Star Wars characters. This is the main sort of area with my shelves with various things on. We'll get into more detail as I go through this video. And this is the view you're more familiar with my gaming desktop and everything. And above that we've got various Star Wars memorabilia hanging from the ceilings and on the walls as well. So that's a quick pan round. Let's now take a look at some of these things in a bit more detail. So this, I would say, is the core of my collection. This is where it all began in the early 80s for me with the vintage Star Wars figures. Much like most people, I sold all my Star Wars toys when I was a kid. I played with them up to about 1984, 85, then sold them all, probably used the money to buy Transformers or something like that. And then in the mid-90s I started to collect them all again. I do actually have a complete collection of the original figures, all 96-ish of them, depending on what you count as part of the collection or not. They took about maybe 20 years to collect, I think. Probably finished collecting them in the mid-2010s. So I've had them for quite a while now, and they are worth a lot more now than when I bought them in the 90s and 2000s. Unfortunately, I'm not able to display them all due to space. A lot of them are actually held in one of these, a Darth Vader's head collector's case, which a lot of people had in the 80s to collect their figures in. So let's start on this bottom shelf and show what I do have. As well as the figures, I do have some vehicles. So I've got the twin pod cloud car from The Empire Strikes Back, the speeder bike, the Imperial troop transport, which never actually appeared in Star Wars until the last episode of the first season of The Mandalorian. I was very excited to see that when it did show up. It may have been in some of the animated shows as well, actually, but I don't recall it from those. So yeah, that was something that came out in the original Star Wars line in 1977-78, but was never actually a real Star Wars thing, much like this, which is the ISP-6, a mini version of the Imperial Shuttle. But then from Star Wars we've got the Land Speeder, from Empire we've got the Tauntaun and the Wampa, and at the back there the AT-ST from Return of the Jedi, although it did briefly appear in Empire Strikes Back as well. So let's move up onto the next shelf, and we've got the Dewback from Star Wars, and then I've created a Jabba's Palace scene here. So we've got Jabba and Salacious Crumb, C-3PO in the background there, the Max Rebo band, and then various characters from Jabba's Palace around the sort of area that I've created, and Luke Skywalker facing off against Jabba there. I've then got the Desert Sail skiff and the Rancor monster on that shelf as well. Then let's get on to the figures. So what I've done here is each row of figures is a selection from each of the 4 lines that were released for the original Star Wars range. So at the front there we've got characters from Star Wars, A New Hope, as you may also know it. Second row is Empire Strikes Back. The third row is Return of the Jedi. And then at the back we've got the real rare stuff. Unfortunately you can't see it because it's a bit in shadow. We've got the rare stuff from the 1985 Power of the Force line, the last range of figures that came out before Star Wars kind of died for a good 12 to 14 years until Episode 1 came out. And at the back there I've also got some of the 12-inch figures from the original Kenner line as well. C-3PO, Darth Vader, Stormtrooper and Boba Fett. So let's just take a look at some of these figures more closely. So we've got the droids, we've got Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader, Stormtrooper, Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the blue Snaggletooth. So this is a particularly rare one if you're not aware. This was only released in a playset in the US, so that's a very hard to find figure. Goes for several £100s for a loose one these days. And we've also finished that row off with Walrus Man and Gonk, the power droid. Second row from The Empire Strikes Back is all the bounty hunters and a lot of the Imperial figures as well, because, well, after all, it is The Empire Strikes Back, so why would I have any Rebel figures there? I have got Yoda at the bottom left there as well. Then from Return of the Jedi, we've got an Ewok, we've got some Imperial figures, kind of gone for a Battle of Endor theme on this row at the moment. So we've got all the characters in the Endor outfits, Leia, Han, Rebel Trooper, and then some of the Rebel heroes as well, or sort of secondary heroes you could say, and then another Ewok at the end. And then again, just going over the Power of the Force line, just to pick a few characters out, we've got the Imperial Gunner, which was actually from the original Star Wars film, Anakin Skywalker, the original Anakin Skywalker before George Lucas rudely replaced him with Hayden Christensen in Return of the Jedi, A-Wing pilot, Lando as a general, Luke as a stormtrooper, again that's from the original film of course, the rare and hard to find Yak Face, who featured in like 5 seconds of video in Return of the Jedi, and yet is one of the most desirable figures to find because it wasn't released on a card in the United States. We've got Luke in his Endor gear, EV-99 from Jabba's Palace, the rubbish Imperial Dignitary, another Ewok, I think that's Warok, and finally R2-D2 with his pop-up lightsaber. For this next section I'm standing on a step just to get a bit of a better vantage point. So I'm a big fan of R2-D2, is my favourite character in the saga, and he's also really good to find collectible things of. So I've got a huge collection of R2-D2 things. As you can see here, a huge range of things, everything from cassette players to soap dispensers to sweet dispensers, an alarm clock, there's a telephone, that's actually in a different place but I'll get to that in a minute. There's a popcorn bowl there, a sweet tin or money box, various play sets, and also figures from the various lines that came out. So there you've got on the left the original 1977 12-inch scale R2-D2, and also then the similar one from the later 1995 range. So I don't just collect vintage things for R2-D2, I collect all kinds of R2-D2 things. And I've also got some quirky things like these M&M's figures, there's a R2-D2 egg cup and bottle stopper there. What else have we got? Hot Wheels R2-D2, and also 2 figures from Star Wars Droids. These are PVC figures from Spain. Obviously Star Wars Droids was a cartoon that came out a couple of years after Return of the Jedi to try and keep the line going, and those are quite nice little figures that were created. Interestingly, if you go back 10 years on my channel, you'll find a review of the Droids video game on the Commodore 64, and I did actually do a little tour of this room then. So if you want to go back and see what it looked like 10 years ago, then find the Star Wars Droids review on my channel, part of the Mastertronic Chronicles. So just to go to the top shelf there, I've got the 4 Mr. Potato Head figures, Spudder Fett, Darth Tater, the Spud Trooper, and R2 Potato. Let's move on now and take a closer look at the vintage carded figures that I've got. Again, I picked these up in the mid to late 90s, I would say, for the most part. These are worth a lot more now than I paid for them. You used to be able to get them sort of £50 to £100, and now they're worth a lot more than that. So firstly, a couple of curiosities. I've got a Luke Skywalker in Jedi outfit with no accessories, carded on a Han Solo card, and that was produced in France, so that's a miscarded thing, so quite a quirky thing to have. Also got a 2-pack from Return of the Jedi. They used these generic 2-packs and just chucked any old figures in, but handily for me, the 2 figures I've got quite desirable in terms of both being Imperial figures. So you've got the Emperor and the Hoth Trooper, no accessories with them, they just chucked them in these naff looking bundles on these cheap cards when they're trying to get rid of them in the mid 80s. So then we've got some more Imperials. Again, we've got another Stormtrooper and the Emperor on Return of the Jedi cards. I've got Darth Vader on a tri-logo Return of the Jedi card. A couple of Empire figures, Yoda and Leia in the Hoth outfit. And then moving on, we've got Lando Calrissian on a Jedi card. Han Solo in his Bespin outfit, again on the Jedi card. These are all on Return of the Jedi cards for the most part. Chewbacca and R2-D2. And finally C-3PO on the Power of the Force card with a coin. They're all kept in sort of UV resistant plastic cases to try and prevent the bubbles getting any more yellow than they are at the moment. What I tried to do is basically just get one figure of each of the heroes. So I've got Han, Leia, Luke, sort of, on that weird French card, Lando, Yoda, Chewbacca, R2-D2, C-3PO, and then obviously I've also got the main Imperial characters as well. So I did used to have quite a few more carded figures that were sort of aliens and things like that, but I decided to trim it down to just sort of the key figures throughout the trilogy. So into the windowsill first, I've got a couple of more recent purchases. These are Lego dioramas of a couple of famous scenes from the trilogy. So you've got the Death Star trench scene from the first Star Wars film, and then also the AT-AT attack from Empire Strikes Back. Remote control BB-8, because BB-8's cool, and why not? I'm not a bigger fan of BB-8 as I am of R2-D2, but I've still got a few BB-8 things. I've got the original AT-AT from the 80s, from The Empire Strikes Back, a weird R2-D2 sort of school computer learning thing. As I said, I collect all kinds of weird R2-D2 things, whatever I can find really, that will fit in the space that I've got. So at the top there, we've got a few different things, including some ships from games that are just there. But there's a Darth Vader lightsaber replica, whatever. Another R2-D2, and another weird addition, the Darth Vader Force Sprinkler. So yeah, if you wanted to sprinkle your garden with Darth Vader with a bendy lightsaber, there you go. Just moving down here, I've got this, which is a R2-D2 beer cooler, or drinks cooler. Again, that's a vintage one from the 80s. Really like that, and that does come out and get used when I have barbecues and things like that. Let's move him out of the way now and look at this cabinet full of lots of different things. So I've opened up the glass cabinet to try and reduce the reflection, and in here I've got a mixture of vintage stuff from the late 70s and up to the mid 80s, and also some more recent stuff. Lots of it R2-D2 related again. So here we've got the R2-D2 cookie jar at the back there, C-3PO cookie jar, and the R2-D2 money box. They were all from the 80s. But in front of those we've got this cool little collection of Kinder Happy Hippo Star Wars figures. So these were released, I think, in the early 2000s. There's a full set of characters there. I do like these little sort of quirky things that are crossing over Star Wars with something else. So let's move down to the next shelf, and we've got a couple of Gentle Giant animated style statues. One with R2-D2 and Princess Leia, and the other one with C-3PO and a Jawa. I like those, they're very nice. They're quite hard to find now. But yeah, very cool. At the front here, they've got a couple of wind-up R2-D2s. The one on the left's just from the 2000s sometime, some kind of fast food toy giveaway or something like that. The one on the right, though, is the original one from the late 70s, released by Takara in Japan. This never got a release. I think it might have come out in Canada as well, but it never got released in the US or Europe, so that's quite a desirable thing. I believe that's considered to be one of George Lucas's favourite things that came from Star Wars merchandise, along with the cookie jar on the shelf above. Behind those, I've got a couple more recent ceramics, so there's a BB-8 cookie jar and also an R2-D2 mug. Again, that's from the 2000s, I think. Moving on to the shelf below, there's the R2-D2 telephone on the left, which I did mention earlier, and on the right, another R2-D2. I can't even remember what that does or what it's for, but there you go, it's there. Some more ceramics as well. We've got the R2-D2 teapot, another mug, and also is this an egg cup? It is an egg cup, yeah, there we go. As you can tell, I can't even remember what half these things are. There's also a M&M's Christmas decoration with R2-D2 and C-3PO there. And moving down to the bottom shelf, there's some plushes. So on the left, there's an R2-D2 plush from the 70s. On the right is a more recent one. And there's also one from the 90s there, from the 90s Power of the Force range. There's an R2-D2 and a black R2-D2, I can't remember what he's called. Salt and pepper shakers. There's a little pewter R2-D2, another little plushy one that talks, and a couple of fast food toys here. This one on the left is an R2-D2 water squirter, and the one on the right, I can't remember what that does, but I think it's got some noise in it, and that's why it's got that little tab in the back to stop the battery wearing out by pulling it out, and obviously the battery would just wear down then. So yeah, loads of R2-D2s in this cabinet. Some of the more desirable things, as well as just things that I like, basically. For this section, I've switched the lights off to try and reduce some of the glare off the picture frames. But here's the autographs I've got. So the late Kenny Baker there, personalised autograph that I got in the mid-90s. There's a Harrison Ford autograph of Han Solo. I really don't know if that's genuine or not, but it did come up with a certificate of authenticity, so maybe it is. And also another personalised one. Again, I got this at the same time as the Kenny Baker one. It's Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca. So let's move on to the ships, and these are probably a bit dusty because I haven't dusted these for a while. So we've got the TIE Interceptor, we've got the Snowspeeder from Empire Strikes Back, we've got the original TIE Fighter from Star Wars in white because, well, that's what they did when it first came out. We've got the X-Wing Fighter, we've got Darth Vader's TIE Fighter in the back there, and finally we've got Slave One with Boba Fett in it. These have all got a figure sat in the cockpit. You can't necessarily see them all from the angles we're at, but there we go. You can actually probably see Luke Skywalker sat in the X-Wing there if you look closely enough. Yep. So just to pick out another couple of things, I've got some artwork on the wall. So this one was just a nice picture of R2-D2 representing some kind of science fair from the mid-2000s. I picked that up at Star Wars Celebration in, I think, 2007 or 2008, whenever it was last in London, or when it was in London that time, not the most recent one, and that's signed by the artist Joe Caroni. And then we've got this, and this is basically the crown jewel of my collection. This is a Star Wars Revenge of the Jedi proof card. So as you probably know, if you're a Star Wars fan, Return of the Jedi was originally going to be called Revenge of the Jedi. Then George Lucas decided that Revenge wasn't a very Jedi-like sort of thing, so he changed the name. But before that, Kenner had already created proof backing cards for the figures to be released in that range. So this is one of those. They're very limited edition. There's probably maybe 100 of each character, and there's like 40 odd characters. So this is a Han Solo and Bespin outfit Revenge of the Jedi proof card. And yeah, that's worth quite a bit of money now. I don't remember what it cost me. All I can say is it's probably worth 10 times more than what it cost me now. So yay, good for me. This collection is basically my pension fund. When I get old enough and I have no more use for it, I will sell it and make quite a bit of money, hopefully. Unless everyone suddenly loses interest in Star Wars for some reason. Let's hope Star Wars doesn't get cancelled in the next few years. Other things I didn't pick out, there's the B-Wing fighter there from Return of the Jedi, a little Max Rebo plush, and of course the classic Millennium Falcon, the Christmas toy everyone wanted in the late 70s and early 80s, and I did get one, but then of course sold it with the rest of my collection. A few other bits and pieces there. This is an interesting crossover between my Star Wars fascination and my theme park fascination, because this is the Star Speeder from Star Tours that's at the Disney parks. I thought that was quite a nice little thing to have. I only picked that up in the last couple of years. And the last thing I want to show a picture of, and it's quite hard to do so because I can't find any angle where I don't get a load of reflection. This is probably as good as it's going to get. This is the artwork from the Star Wars Droids cartoon. You can see R2-D2 and C-3PO dancing there, along with the character Mungo Boobab. So this is from one of the episodes. This is the original animation cell. The background is a reproduction, but this is an actual piece of animation cell used in the production of one of those cartoons. So that's a nice little thing to have framed and put on the wall as well. And finally, just to finish things off, this is a sort of overspill of my R2-D2 and BB-8 stuff because I ran out of space on the other shelves and on the floor. So there's a few other things here, nothing very noteworthy to pick out, just various little bits and pieces. There's a couple of fake Lego R2 and BB-8 and obviously some big characters there. Otherwise, this shelving is where I keep all my video game stuff, along with this stuff in the corner, which I'm sure you've seen many times before in the background of my videos. So that'll do it for this Star Wars Day special, a tour of my Star Wars collection. If you enjoyed this video, then let me know your thoughts about my collection and anything in particular that piqued your interest in the comments. And if this is something you'd like to see me do more of in the future, looking around my Star Wars collection and focusing in on particular items, then let me know. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Thanks very much for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.